emotions seem to be the bedrock that underlies politics, such that when I encounter a person, for instance, who tends towards conspiracy theories, with a high degree of accuracy, I can predict that they had a difficult relationship with figures of authority in their childhood. And so when I see exactly what you're talking about, which is change for change's sake, I wonder if when I engage with these types of people and discuss, I guess I often find that discussions about policy get nowhere. I mean, they cite their studies, I cite mine, and we get nowhere. It often seems that what needs to be recognized is there's sort of an emotional component to it, which is there's this desire to be recognized, affirmed, and acknowledged. And I'm curious, because you were working with a lot of students at Evergreen that I'm sure were working through this and didn't necessarily have a lot of the real-world experience to have deep policy understanding. Is there a particular sort of emotional makeup of the type of person that is radically activist, wants change for change's sake, without necessarily understanding the structure that they're trying to change, that would be helpful to someone like me in terms of engaging with them to see what it is from an emotional perspective that they're looking for?
Well, I do think that there are certain parameters, I think they're developmentally produced, but that there are certain configurations of a human being that will leave them driven by emotion, reluctant to do the analysis. Mm-hmm. And, frankly, none of us are in a great position to do the analysis because the data we're working mm-hmm. from is pretty low quality in most cases. But there's also some basic software that we all acquire, and we lose contact with the right tools. So at the risk of overcomplicating things, consciousness is our toolkit for things that are not easy to understand based on what we already know. Mm-hmm. And so the question is, for most people, the trigger to processing something consciously is set way too high. In other words, you rarely are able to raise a question with somebody in such a way that they will actively say, well, let me think about why I believe what I believe and whether there might be an error in it. So what you're running into is a kind of subconscious reflexive reaction that's based on an intuition, right? And those intuition can be excellent if it's really well tutored, or it can be really low quality if the thing that built the intuition was not representative. But the danger for all of us is that our friends and neighbors are very prone in general to stay out of conscious analysis and default to other things that they find more comforting. And so what I hear in what you're saying, I hear a conscious mind, and I hear you even engaging other people's lack of consciousness in a conscious way. Why do they feel that way? Why do I have such a hard time reaching such people? And I guess the final thing I would say about it is that I did learn in the classroom over the course of 15 years that the key to reaching people has to do with triggering them to go mm-hmm. into this other mindset. Once
Sure.
somebody is engaging you consciously, there's all kinds of progress you can make. Until they do, there's very little. Mm-hmm. So the thing that one has to do is come at them in a way that is surprising enough that they don't have a ready-made answer. Mm-hmm. And to the extent that you sound like the opposition, you will get filed that way.
And that's what I've seen. And I appreciate that that I'm able to fake being one of those conscious minds. But the truth is, I can turn it on for about an hour when I'm in front of the camera. But when I engage I see it in myself. Especially with family, and there's times where I just want to win an argument, and I see that same survival ideological process occur in myself. I would say for 80% of the discussions that I'm in, if I'm being completely honest. And what it seems to me, as I've done my own internal, therapy and work, and I'm into psychedelics for the purposes of sort of unraveling some of that trauma, is that as I unravel some of the trauma, I am more capable of being more conscious more often. And the feeling that is arising in me at some level is of not being safe. And so when I'm in an environment where I lock down and I all of a sudden need to win the argument, it's because some part of me doesn't feel safe. Either I don't feel respected, I feel overlooked, or I need to assert some kind of power in order to regain control. And so what I've seen is that I actually have an assistant who is an Evergreen alum. And so she had sent out a lot of messages to Evergreen people about, what we should ask you. And some of the things came back were highly inappropriate and unkind. But she didn't have a strong opinion, but I could see that early in the conversation with her that there was a sense that we were opposite. But it was only when I sort of said, okay, take a deep breath. She needs time to express. And also she raises good points. And if you can recognize that, she's going to feel more safe. And then by the end of it, we get, you know what? If me and Bret sat down, we probably agree on 99% of the things. So it seems to me that when people engage in these political discussions at policy level, there's a more foundational piece of perhaps safety and respect that is being completely overlooked. And I fear that the tools which we now use to engage in political discourse, the technology that we have made it so easy to blow past safety and respect. And so I don't know how to get it back on track other than these long-form conversations, quite frankly. It's the only thing, and it's why we do this podcast. It's not incredibly lucrative or anything like that for us.
Well, I agree, and I also find the podcast thing surprising and very hopeful. Mm-hmm. But, there's this piece of video, and believe me, I did not see the event coming, but this piece of video that brought me to public attention, where I'm confronted in the hallway by 50 students I'd never met, claiming that I was a racist, and I attempt to engage them because that's what I did. Mm-hmm. Confused college students were basically a hazard of my profession, and I was more than ready to talk with them. They were not more than ready to talk with me, interestingly. But in that piece of tape, I heard myself say something, and in real time, I couldn't believe that this is what I was choosing to say at that moment. But nonetheless, it's what came out of my mouth. And I said that I was interested in dialectic, not debate, and that the difference was in a dialectic, the purpose was to use disagreement to figure out what's true rather than to win. Mm-hmm. This is exactly what you're looking for, mm-hmm. right? To the extent that you are in a conversation where the purpose is winning, there's very little point. You will maybe discover some loophole in what your interlocutor is saying or something like that, but you won't discover anything new. Whereas it sounds like in your conversation with your assistant, actually you went from a perception that you might be in very different places to an agreement that probably most of what was being debated wasn't actually at issue. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what we need. We need it everywhere. My feeling is life is too short. I never want to be in another debate, like not even a single one, right? It's all dialectic from here on out if I can arrange it, mm-hmm. because if I'm wrong, I want to know how I'm wrong as quickly as I can possibly figure that out. I don't want to win. I want to lose, and I want to get past it and then start being right again. So
one of the things that I've been contending with is this idea that, yes, if you want a dialectic, I always, as a philosophy major, assumed, okay, the way to dialectic is via logic. And what I am seeing as I encounter people is that a critical component is emotional quotient, is understanding people, is making them feel safe. And there are times at which, and I'll give you an example, one of the questions that my assistant really wanted me to ask you, if there was anything that you regretted about the Evergreen, how you conducted yourself. And I'm not saying that necessarily you ought to or you should, but it seems like those kinds of concessions, which are these emotional mea culpas of, you know what, you're right, I was a bit rude to you, open up the door for dialectic, and even if there's nothing that logically you did wrong. Hope that you guys enjoyed that clip. If you want to see more like this and have us do more podcasts, we are 100% funded by our generous patrons. And if you'd like to contribute, there's a link in the description, and we'll have one pop up on the screen right here so that we can do more podcasts where we have fun conversations and hopefully some deep ones like this. Either way, hope that you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one.